I am here with my wrap up for the books that I read in the year 2018. Now, I've read, at the time I'm filming this, and I am pre-filming this, so this isn't going to be every single book that I have read in 2018 because 2018 isn't over at the time that I'm filming this, so there will be more to add to this list, which you can check out on my Goodreads page as and when I finish those. But as of right now, I have read 71 books this year. And the reason I decided to do this video is because I only started this channel at the end of this year, so I haven't done wrap-ups throughout the whole of 2018. I've only done two, and I will do one for December as well, so if you want to know what I read in December that isn't included in this list, then you can also go and watch that if you want to once it's up. So I'm not going to talk about every single one of these books, and I am going to split this video into two parts, I think. So I will do some books in this video and then some books in another video, just so that this isn't incredibly long and boring. But let's jump right into it. So I started off the year by reading The Chronicles of Ixia by Maria V. Schneider, and the majority of this series was a reread for me because I had already read Poison Study, Magic Study, Power Study, Assassin Study, and Fire Study, and Ice Study. And on top of that, I also read Stormglass, Sea Glass, Spyglass, Shadow Study, Night Study, Shattered Glass, and Dawn Study. That's a lot of books to comprehend. Essentially, it is a series that is split into three parts with some novellas mixed in the middle. So you've got part one, which is books 1 to 3, Poison Study, Magic Study, and Fire Study, are the study series, the original study series. And then there's Power Study is a novella that comes after it, and Assassin Study is a novella that comes in the middle of it. And then after that, you've got a separate series called the Glass series, which is also 3 books, and that's Stormglass, Sea Glass, and Spyglass. And the novellas are just Ice Study, actually. And those follow a different protagonist, and then the last 3 is back to the study series, so back to the same protagonist that was followed in the original 3 books, and those books are Shadow Study, Night Study, and Dawn Study, and the novella is Shattered Glass. So that's all a little bit complicated, but essentially I love this series. It's incredible. I have spoken about it before on this channel. I will briefly tell you what the first book is about, but not what the others are about, because spoilers. Essentially, we follow a woman named Yelena who is in prison in the first chapter of Poison Study, and she is there to be executed, and once she is collected to be taken to her seeming execution, she's actually told that she has a choice to make. She can either be executed as planned, or she can choose to become a poison taster for Commander Ambrose, who is the man in charge of this world, this city that she lives in. And the execution leads to certain death, and a poison taster would lead her to probable death. So that is the option that she chooses, and there's a lot of mystery, there is some political intrigue, there is magic. There's not so much world building in the first book, but then there is a lot more world building as the series moves on, and I would highly recommend it. The next thing that I read was an audiobook called 6 Degrees of Assassination, which is a BBC production, and that followed a couple of agents in MI5 who were investigating a terrorist incident, and it was very interesting, although not exactly the best thing to be listening to whilst using the London Underground, so word of warning. The next 2 books that I read were A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of 4 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Those are 2 books in the Sherlock Holmes series. They're the only ones I've ever read. I listened to them as audiobooks. They're narrated by Stephen Fry, who is an excellent narrator, so I would highly recommend that. I really did enjoy them, and I'm not going to tell you what they're about because it's Sherlock Holmes, surely everybody knows. The next books that I read were The Sapphire Rose, if I'm looking down, I've got notes here, The Sapphire Rose, The Diamond Throne and The Ruby Knight by David Eddings. And these are a pretty old fantasy trilogy, so a fairly tropey kind of storyline. Essentially, we follow a group of travellers who are trying to recover an artefact, which I won't tell you what it is because it doesn't get revealed straight away, but they're trying to recover an artefact to save someone. And really, I don't want to tell you too much because it's one of those that I don't think you really want to know too much going into, but if you like classic fantasy stories, then I think you would enjoy this one. The next books that I read were Rhapsody, Prophecy and Destiny, which are the first 3 books in the Symphony of Ages series by Elizabeth Haydn. Again, this is an older fantasy series with fairly standard tropes. It's a travel story again, where a group of individuals who start off in one place go on a journey and find themselves in a different place and time, and they have to adapt to deal with that as well as fight an epic evil. The next books that I read were The Tattered Banner, The Huntsman's Amulet and The Talastrian Song by Duncan M. Hamilton. And again, I listened to these on audiobook, and essentially what these are about is this boy named Soren who is a street urchin, and he is just trying to survive, and one of the things that he enjoys to do is go and watch the sword fighting duels, and he dreams that he knows it's not practical and it's not going to happen, but he wishes that he could fight alongside those great sword duelists. And then he gets sponsored to go to the Banneret School to become a sword fighter, and the series follows his adventures. The next duology that I read was This Savage Song and Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab, and this is the Monsters of Verity duology, and it follows 2 characters. One is Catherine Harker and the other is August Flynn, and Catherine Harker is the daughter of a man who runs this one half of the city, and August Flynn is the adopted son of a man who runs the other half of the city. And this city is divided because in this futuristic dystopian world, crimes committed by people breed monsters, and the severity of the crime dictates the type of monster that is created. So Catherine Harker's father is offering protection in exchange for money on his side of the city, whilst August's father is offering the opportunity to fight against the monsters for protection. And these 2 characters' paths cross in a multitude of ways, and it's a really fun duology. I really enjoyed it. The next series that I read was the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. I again listened to these on audiobooks, and again they were narrated by Stephen Fry, which is great because he's fantastic. I am not going to go into what they're about. It's Harry Potter. The next was The School for Good and Evil by Suman Chinani. I've spoken about this book a fair bit on this channel, and I actually have included this book in my most disappointing reads for 2018, which may be up already, and if not, it should be up shortly, so I will direct you to that video. The next book I read was another one that sadly is on my most disappointing reads of the year, so I'm not going to go into great detail about it here, but that is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Next up was the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, so The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages. This is a fantasy series that's set in a world where the magic system centres around metals, and you have two types of magical people in this world. You have Mistings and Mistborn. Mistings are able to burn one type of metal to do one kind of magic. Mistborn are able to burn all of the metals to do all of the different types of magic. And the premise of this story is it's set in a world where the bad guy already won and has been ruling for hundreds of years with an iron fist and is oppressing the people of this world, who are called the Scar, and promoting the upper classes. So the Scar are very badly treated and the upper classes pretty much do whatever they want. And we follow a band of thieves who band together to try to overthrow the Lord Ruler and bring their Scar people out of the darkness that they've been living in. Epic series, so good. Next up, I read This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, which is actually a non-fiction book. It is his diary of his time as a junior doctor, and so it's very funny, it's very poignant. If you live in the UK and you use the NHS, I personally think it should be mandatory reading. I'm pretty sure they should be including it on school syllabus. I think it's a very, very important read, and I would highly recommend you pick it up. Next up, I read a couple of the Penguin modern short books. So I read Dark Days by James Baldwin and 3 Japanese short stories by various authors. Dark Days is a collection of James Baldwin's essays commenting upon the lives of Black people in America post World War II. It's very deep, it's a little bit of a difficult read, but I think it's an important one. I don't want to say I enjoyed it, because it's not the kind of book that you really enjoy necessarily, but I did find it interesting. And the Japanese short stories were sort of like fables, really, and they were a little bit odd, but I'm glad I read them. Then after that, I read Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, purely because it's the original story of my favourite film of all time, and it pretty much follows the same story. Howl is a magician, he lives in a castle that moves, and Sophie is a hatter, as in she makes hats, and she is then cursed by the Witch of the Waste into the body of an old woman, and she goes in search of someone who can turn her back into the young girl that she is, and discovers Howl, and they go on various adventures together. There are a few differences between the book and the film, so bear that in mind, but I did enjoy it. I like the film better. But that's just because I already was in love with the film to begin with. Next up, I read a book called The Anxiety Solution by Chloe Brotheridge, and it's really just a collection of tips and tricks on how to deal with anxiety. It was a little bit helpful, but I don't know that it would necessarily be a replacement for any kind of therapy. I picked it up after my counselling sessions came to an end, and it did sort of ease me back into the world without counselling, but since then I've had CBT and I'm on the waiting list for more counselling, so clearly it's not going to cure you, but it was helpful, I suppose. Next up, Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is set in a world where the magic revolves around breaths. Everybody is born with one breath, and the more breaths you have, the more powerful you are. And breaths can be freely given from one individual to another, which is how you can build up breaths and become more powerful. The way that the magic works is through a process called awakening, which means that you can awaken inanimate objects, and the closer they are to human form, the better and more powerful they are, and the less breaths they take to animate. Now, this story is a multiple perspective story, but our two main protagonists are two sisters, one of whom has been sent off to marry the God King and another who is trying to rescue her. And we follow their two stories, we follow their character development, and they both develop massively in this book but in very different ways. One of the characters I loved from the beginning and one of the characters I didn't love until the last 25% of the book. So another very good one. But that's it for part 1. I will be back with part 2 of the books I read in 2018 and I hope to see you there. If you like this one and want to see more like this from me, including part 2, then do think about hitting that subscribe button. I'd be so grateful. And that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you here again soon. Bye!